Today is day 2 of the Lori Vallow trial, and I decided the perfect background would be Charles Vallow. This image behind me is taken from a body cam when he was trying to get help to deal with Lori, who had taken the kids and went into a hotel room. He never got the help he needed, sadly, as we all know how this ended. Yesterday, we had a juror that was gotten rid of because the money they would take in from jury duty would not cover their child support and alimony. Today, I don't believe a reason was given that the juror left, but we are now down 2 and have just 2 alternates. Now, a third juror has also seen the body cam footage from yesterday on YouTube, but doesn't remember specifics, and both sides have agreed for now that they will be allowed to stay. The streams were late unmuting Lori's first question to the witness, but thankfully people in the courtroom tweeted it. Lori asked, what did it look like when he walked into the house? This witness, for anyone who doesn't remember, didn't watch, he is a member of the fire department who attempted CPR on Charles Vallow. Now, Lori is focusing in on, did they do CPR properly? Did Alex Cox do CPR properly? And I'm going to be honest, I don't think this matters for her defense at all, because her defense is it was self-defense shooting. Now, if he didn't render aid, does that mean he didn't shoot Charles Vallow in self-defense? I don't think the answer to that is yes. It still could have been a self-defense shooting. It wasn't, but I don't think this CPR argument actually helps her case, but she is going to drone on about it and spend a lot of time trying to find holes in 911 or the fire department or the police when it comes to this CPR. The witness said he did an assessment when he came in and started CPR. Charles had 2 gunshot wounds. Lori asked about the shirt color Charles had on, and he says he doesn't remember. Lori questions if it was hard to see the blood on the shirt, and he said he saw blood on the chest. Also, he didn't see blood on the abdomen. The shirt was cut off, avoiding bullet holes using trauma shears. He names the firefighters that were there, and he goes on over how he actually teaches people to do CPR. Lori points out explaining how to do CPR over the phone might be difficult without a video to also accompany it. There's objections, speculation, overruled. And it could be hard to explain CPR over the phone. Would your CPR class be successful without visuals? Objection, relevant, sustained. They teach, in some cases, to only do compressions, especially early CPR classes. They did CPR on Charles for maybe up to a minute before flipping him. He wasn't counting how many compressions he did. Doing CPR as a group is often easier than solo. After rolling him over, they did compressions again for maybe another minute. They had to stop to use the heart monitor and then started with CPR again. There was no electrical activity on the heart monitor. Monitor was on within 2 minutes of patient contact. And you see, this is very important to remember for anyone that didn't watch yesterday. They are arriving literally minutes after the call. What Lori doesn't want brought up is the fact that the call was something like 40-some minutes after Charles was shot. So, yeah, that's kind of the main takeaway that Lori isn't wanting mentioned. So she's focusing on what happened once paramedics arrived. The monitor was on within 2 minutes of patient contact. He didn't apply the pads, so he doesn't know if they removed blood to then place the EKG pads on his chest. Charles's shirt was removed at some point. Captain Keller called the death. The witness reviewed some documentation for today's talking, such as the dispatch notes, paper documentation, and his testimony in Idaho. Lori probably just had alarm bells ringing. She truly messed up here. The jury has to wonder, what does he mean? Testimony in Idaho. Because remember, the jury doesn't know so far what Lori was charged and convicted of in Idaho. Lori quickly asked about the paper documentation he looked over, which is the list of treatments they did and those results. He was on the scene for 20 to 25 minutes. He said he saw some man with officers, but he doesn't remember conversing with the officers on the scene. No one in fire was asked to look at Alex Cox. Lori asked if he spoke to media about this case. Objection, relevance. Judge asks what the relevance is. Lori says to know how many times he has given testimony. At this point, I actually had a moment going, is Lori trying to bring in the Idaho stuff to cause a mistrial? Which doesn't make sense, because I thought she wanted the case over so she could get out of jail and go to a nice, comfy prison. Obviously, him talking about his testimony is going to mean he's going to have to tell everyone that he had testimony in the death of, the cases in Idaho. And that's not something that Lori wants, right? And the judge knows it. So, well, maybe Lori does want it. Well, the judge knows they shouldn't do it yet. So sidebar time. So sidebar, again, if you're not watching, they have a white noise machine that plays in the room. The judge and Lori and the prosecution put on headsets, and they can only hear each other. So the jury can't hear, the jury can stay in the room, and they can discuss things that the jury shouldn't know about. Basically, I know I got a little off topic there. Basically, Lori is really flirting around with putting in that Tylee and JJ were murdered. She's getting real close to that, whether she realizes it or not. But they come back and that question doesn't get asked. So I guess someone said something. Doing compressions if there are wounds to the chest could cause more damage, but that doesn't matter if the heart isn't beating. It's just appropriate treatment. Because Lori was basically, she tries it a few times. She tries to make it like, well, why would you do CPR if there's, a gunshot wound? Because he'll die if you don't. Heart's not beating. Lori asks, would a common person hesitate to do CPR on a bullet wound? Objection, speculation, sustained. The witness says he wouldn't hesitate to push on a bullet wound if the heart was stopped. They checked pulse, used equipment. He had one wound on his chest, another in the abdomen. Lori asked about the crunch when doing CPR for the first time, and no determination about the amount of pressure required for CPR as far as this guy knows, like how many pounds per square inch. Just hard and fast, and if they're doing it forcefully enough, they would get the crack. Remember, Lori is also trying to picture maybe he tried, but he didn't push hard enough. Alex Cox is a man. Maybe if it was a very dainty woman or a child, sure, they wouldn't be able to do it enough to get the crack. I have no doubts in my mind, and a jury probably doesn't either, that Alex Cox could push that hard. They've seen him on video. They know how big he is. Redirect. Witness is asked if 911 regularly instructs people on how to do CPR. Said he'd have to speculate since he isn't 911. Asked if he's heard 911 instructing people to do CPR, and he says he gets told they're telling people. He doesn't hear the actual call. 911 is trained to then have untrained people do CPR. They know how to lead you to do it. He kept doing CPR before different moments in the timeline. Basically, there's a timeline of treatment, and in between those treatments was constant CPR. And sometimes simultaneously. If they left Charles' shirt around his neck when calling his death, then that's how it would stay. Because there was speculation, so they cut his shirt. Did they fully remove it? Did they not? Sounds like it was around his neck, and they just left it, because when they call death, they pick up the stuff they can pick up, and they leave. Someone with a gunshot wound still needs their blood circulating. The point of CPR is to circulate the blood so they don't go brain dead. It wouldn't matter if you cause more injuries, because if they were brain dead, who cares? He didn't feel CPR was done by Alex Cox. There was a juror question and another sidebar with the headsets and the white noise, but that question didn't materialize and the witness can go. It must have had some issue. I don't know if those asked questions end up on the record, but if they do, that'd be very interesting to know. What did the jury want to ask they weren't allowed to? Next up is Kent Keller from the Chandler Fire Department. He was the captain on the scene that day. Talk of his training. When fire gets called for a shooting, they stage and then wait to be told the scene is secure. Fire can advise if someone is deceased. When they leave the scene, disturbing as little as possible when they is their main goal when leaving. If the person is dead. Their main job is to treat the patient. Not disturbing the scene is secondary to that. 911 told them CPR instruction was given and CPR was in progress. 911 is certified to give a CPR instruction. Knowing a patient was given CPR before arrival means the patient should have been more viable. The house when they arrived seemed empty. The only thing he noticed around the patient was a baseball bat to the right and a baseball cap. He later noticed a bullet on the ground. Charles was on his back. He had a gunshot wound to his chest. He has shown a photo of Charles and to talk about the pooling around the collarbone. If CPR was given, he would have expected there to be more blood. No CPR was being given when they got there, and this is something that I will say is rather interesting. So, I don't know the exact 911 call, and I'm sure it's out there, and I'm sure someone has watched it, so I will ask. How did they get from him claiming he's doing CPR to then going to the door with his hands up? Because, theoretically, if you are doing CPR trying to revive someone, even though you just shot them, I do find it odd the police would order you to stop CPR and come out with your hands up. I wonder if there was some sort of indication that he wasn't actually doing the CPR or whatever, but if there is, that hasn't been played in court. If someone is dead and you do CPR, blood can still come out of the wounds. You have to cut off what is around the the gunshot wounds to see what's going on. He saw 2 gunshot wounds on Charles. He wasn't breathing and no pulse. They started CPR because he could have stopped those things moments before they got there. So basically when they arrived, there's no CPR, but that doesn't mean it didn't just stop. Doesn't mean that his breathing didn't just stop before they got there. Doesn't mean that he had a pulse until moments before, so they started CPR. They rolled him to look for exit wounds. On the back, he had mottled skin, which is caused by not enough oxygen getting to the skin. He had, I know the word. I'm going to butcher it, though. Lividity, which is blood pooling, which takes longer. My brain broke when I tried to say that. A lot of treatments were being worked on simultaneously, and Charles was flatlined on the EKG, or the heart monitor. There was fixed pupils, more blood came out during CPR, but there was no active bleeding when they arrived, which signifies the heart stopped. There shouldn't have been a crunch. It's not normal if CPR was already done. Some modeling on the front too agreed to end life-saving measures, talk of what was left behind. They noticed a man outside with the police when they arrived. He didn't appear injured. If asked to treat him, they would have. When they left, Alex Cox still didn't appear injured. He saw a female and a female teenager. He points out Lori. He overheard Lori say something about not getting invited due to a pool party due to commotion at the house. I swear on the feed at the same time I was thinking the word, someone said what? Maybe I'm forgetting the pool party thing and it was in her police stuff. Maybe it was something that just wasn't on body cam. And I have heard it before and it slipped my mind, but that was weird to me. Again, someone in the comments will probably just say it slipped my mind. Lori is up to ask him questions. She has him explain what staging is, where they wait close to the scene so the scene can be secure. Fire does not wear a body cam. They don't carry anything to measure body temperature. Their training isn't to use temperature to determine time of death. Modeling was in progress and present. He doesn't know how long it takes for modeling to be present. Blood pooling was in progress. It starts immediately after the heart stops. Can't say if medication makes that faster. He didn't take time of death, but time of treatment ceasing. He didn't know Alex Cox was told to come outside. He didn't know he was involved or who he was. He didn't know for a fact. He doesn't know for a fact if CPR was actually given or not. There's a redirect. Modeling is seen before lividity. The blood pooling, he has treated patients who have had their heart just stop. You don't see modeling. You don't see lividity in these patients. He doesn't know how long it takes for that to form, though. It is something that you see in a deceased person. You can know if CPR was done due to the indentation in the chest, and if the sternum was cracked loose from the rib cage. You will also see blood spread due to a gunshot wound. Ongoing CPR might have actually limited modeling if it was done. It is unlikely CPR was given. Now, there's a juror question, which, they have to discuss. So headsets go on, white noise plays, and then we actually get this one. They ask about drugs being given to try to keep the heart pumping, and if they weren't given, why? Those drugs aren't for trauma. If the heart was stopped pumping, the heart has stopped pumping, ephedrine would do nothing in this case. The ACLS protocol was asked about, and it was followed. No physician was patched in to stop the treatment. Fire department can call death, but not time of death. Lori doesn't have a follow-up, but the state has some. Ephedrine is used for cases like electrical shock stopping the heart. The type of trauma and how long matters when you're using a chemical like that. A gunshot is treated differently than a heart attack. ACLS protocol is a flow chart on what to do that ends with stopping treatment. You would call a nurse if a patient was being turned over for care, for example. On leaving, you would let them know. Terminating treatment, you call in that you stop treatment, but you don't need a doctor sign off for that. Doctors have given them training and to stop the treatment, to know when to stop it, and that's how that was done. So part of the state's redirect was basically someone on the jury knows terms. Let's put it that way. Someone on the jury has some form of medical knowledge if they're asking about ACLS protocol and things like that, which is bad for Lori because it means they're going to hear about the modeling and the lividity, and they're going to be like, oh. That means that when we start if we get into more medical stuff, they're going to have an idea of what it means. And at this point, they went on a lunch break. But yeah, Lori was really flirting around the idea of Idaho. Asking, Idaho gets brought up, and I thought, okay, Idaho gets brought up, she's going to back off on that. But then she talks about wanting to know about other times he testified. And it's like, whoa, but where did you testify? Well, do you want him to mention the trial and the cases and the charges in Idaho? So obviously that went to a sidebar. I really do think she wants to just go back to prison where it's more comfortable, but she might accidentally give herself a mistrial at this point, and we're sitting at 2 alternative jurors. We're on day 2 and down 2 jurors. That is not a good sign. But we'll see, and we'll continue with the day, and it'll be right on after this. So, apparently, after all the feeds were cut for the break, some more happened in the courtroom. Everyone watching the live streams missed. Lori filed a motion yesterday that was about a discovery violation. The prosecution says they need to know what Lori's expert witness plans to bring into the trial. The judge asks if she wants to argue the motion right now, and Lori says no. The judge asks when she wants it argued. Lori asks if he wants to argue it right now. And the judge then says it doesn't appear to be a discovery violation. The motion is more like a discovery request than a violation. And this is a quote. The problem that we have here is the software and those things were available and they were not handed over from the state. Lori says complete downloads weren't given, just reports. Lori says the state didn't turn over everything from their downloads and requests a separate hearing. The judge says it might be Friday. If so, there goes my schedule of things, trying to get things done, because I had things I needed to do Friday, and then I was going to try to do my taxes on the weekend. So who knows how things are screwed up now if they have a Friday hearing. Could be short, but even if it's short, I still have to be available, right? All of that was not caught on the live stream, so I'm glad people in the courtroom are reporting. We're back from lunch break with a new juror problem brought up by the prosecution. Juror 15 was looking at their cell phone during testimony and soon after put a question into the question box. Now, it might be a coincidence, but right after, there was a detailed medical question that was asked. They don't let live streaming of the juror being questioned for obvious reasons, but people are in the court. So we did find out what it was about. The juror claims, at least, he was texting his daughter, not looking things up, and the judge told him to turn his phone off. If this juror was kicked out, that would have been the third juror. If the juror got a question off the internet or from someone he was texting, and then that was used, that probably would have been a mistrial. We are having nothing but juror problems. I wasn't expecting this, but it's happening. So then, Lori has an objection to the next witness, which this has been talked about. This is Daniel Coons. Lori thinks the state wants him to testify as an expert instead of as a witness, because they want him to talk about gunshot trajectory. The judge explains he has training and experience, and the judge is hesitant to call him an expert. The judge thinks this is something someone with experience with guns could testify to. Defense has had time to question him after their concerns were previously raised. Judge asks if state will ask about which shot was first. State says he attended the autopsy, and the shored wound comes into play. Remember, a shored wound is where there's something bracing behind it, so that would mean he'd have to be on the floor for that wound to have occurred. Or something hard behind him. The state says he can say the trajectory of the shots, but for example, he wouldn't have the expertise to say someone wasn't on the ground, shot, and then stood up, and then were shot the second time while standing. So, let's put it this way. The state's saying he can't say which shot came first. I mean, technically, Charles could have been laying on the ground and then got shot and then stood up and then got shot. But there were two bullets, right? So one came first, kind of process of elimination. They're not saying it that way, but that's what they're implying. It's not a question about which one came first, really. The judge will allow his testimony. Lori questions how trajectory matters to the conspiracy. And honestly, I think it makes perfect sense. If the plan was always to murder him, the fact that he was shot standing and then a second shot fits into the narrative. Lori then says she stipulates to the two shots. So there we go. We're done. That's like right there's why. State says it's relevant because the defense is claiming self-defense. Again, to me, it's really simple that he's going to get to testify. Jury is brought back. Daniel Coons is up. He was a homicide detective at the time of the offense. He was trained for SWAT. He was cross-trained as basic SWAT, became a sniper and a sniper instructor. There's a lot in this testimony I'm cutting down, by the way, because a lot of it is just not needed for the highlights. I'll put it that way. Excuse me. I might be getting sick. I have been coughing more. I'll talk a little bit more maybe about that at the end of the whole video. He became a shooting reconstruction expert. Shooting reconstruction is being able to take things from a scene and put together what happens. I feel like I should tell you, when he's testifying, he is doing the thing where they face the jury instead of facing the prosecutor and the defense. So, you know, he's good at that. He's obviously testified plenty before. He was certified in shooting reconstruction in 2017. He heard radio traffic of the shooting and went out. It was a 15 to 20 minutes later he arrived. Multiple detectives arrived. He was assigned the scene to make sure the scene is processed properly and report back. A crime scene tech was called out to the scene. It's a collaborative effort. No one's really in charge. A diagram was created to match what they saw, but it isn't to scale. Now, this was submitted, but Lori added the comment that she doesn't know how it will help if it's not to scale. Well, because it's an overview. It was an overview of the residence and all the items they collected. In the second page, we'll explain what all the labels on it means. They use 2 known points for references for distances, which is, so basically it's an overview of the house, and you can see where the body is, different items, and they're labeled, and then there's references based on the distance away from the corners of a wall in the house. They also used, let me find it here, they used Lizard Q to do photos of the scene. to create basically an overlapping image. It's a 3D sphere of the scene. I've seen similar actually used at like high def versions used at like sporting events, where they'll take a photo from the very center of like a football stadium, and then it's like super high quality and you can zoom in on every person there, a 360 camera. It seems to be kind of like that. We don't really get a good view of it, is why I'm giving that comparison. So I'm giving what my expectation is of this. They bring a USB into evidence and have the witness open the sphere image on a laptop. Took the stream a second to realize it, but they zoomed in on the witness, not the screen visible, because there's going to be an image that contains the body, right? The white cards at the scene are dropped by officers to let detectives know they found something of interest. This is to record the scene before anything is moved. There are 2 sphere images taken at different heights, so they can be combined to get measurements. They do regular photography as well at the scene. They submitted photos from the scene, talk about how they collect evidence. At the scene, they had to physically cut out evidence, which we'll get to that. So some things were not just taken, they had to be cut out. They look for bloodied items, projectiles, things that can show who was present at the scene. They start by photographing outside, and then they go in. And at this point, they show a photo outside the home. Lori objects because these photos haven't been submitted. State moves to submit them, and then Lori objects because some of the photos are similar. The judge asks for numbers specifically, and Lori doesn't have them, so the judge browses through every image. It takes a bit. The judge says, no pictures are the same, so all are submitted. Like, some of the photos are like, here's an item, here's another angle, here's another angle, here it is in the hands of a detective for a better view. Like, all of those are relevant, right? Pictures of the front and the vehicle are shown. You can't get to see the inside photos on the stream, obviously due to the body, but they do go through the photos showing inside the house as they found it when they arrived. Seem to mostly give the jury a lay of the land. They talk of a hat. They show where the bullet struck the baseboard. They had to pull back the board and eventually recovered the projectile. They bring in the actual projectile and baseboard as evidence, and it's brought into evidence. Multiple photos of the baseball bat, and this is where things get really interesting. Not blood or biological matter. Neither are visible on that baseball bat. The bat brought into evidence was shown. They actually have the bat. They have a photo of a projectile with a deformation near Charles Vallow. That bullet is brought in and shown. Charles Vallow's left hand had blood on it. The blood was just on his left hand and not on his arm. No blood on the floor around his hand. An image is shown of a shell casing from a semi-automatic handgun. The witness owns that type of gun himself and has used it. Explains how casings work in a gun to the jury. Another casing shown. The actual casings are brought in. He was present when the medical examiner was there. They took photos of the blood after the body was moved. The pool was then altered somewhat due to removing the body. And after photographing that, the blood pool was then cleaned up. So they found a defect in the floor under the body. It was consistent to being under his left shoulder. They showed it, and they couldn't find similar defects in other places on the floor. So we actually had to see this defect. It appeared consistent with a bullet strike. That piece of wood was physically cut out with, sounds like, much effort. They wrote on it to give the direction that it was facing, because that's important, because directionality of the bullet would matter. And that physical piece is submitted into evidence. And that is when they took their afternoon break. So, yeah. They have evidence. They show it looks like the directionality of the bullet makes sense. We have the bat with no blood on it, no biological evidence, at least visibly shown. Maybe Lori will cross whether they tested the bat for blood or not, but it does kind of go against Alex's story. An injury. Because remember, even if Alex had an injury on the back of his head, what was it from? When did it happen? Did he do it to himself, right? Because he had a long time. Remember, they're talking about how he seemed to bleed increasingly as he was out there, but they only called the police like 40-some minutes after Charles Vallow died. That's plenty of time for him to hit himself, get a lump to start forming, and then he could scratch it with something, for example, to get blood flowing. And if he did that type of marking just before walking out, it would explain why it slowly happened then, Because it's weird, I think, that you wouldn't start bleeding for 40 minutes, 40 plus minutes, right? That seems a little weird. Now, when I mentioned it being sick, I'm just going to mention it here because maybe I'll get worse before I finish. I'm not sure how long this next part will be. The person that I was dealing with yesterday that was basically bedbound, they're not feeling much better today. Their voice has, I don't know if you've dealt with this, but like you breathe and you can hear like a crackling sound, which is reminds me of the CPR thing, but you hear like a crackling sound when they breathe. I heard that in my own breathing a little bit, and I've been coughing more, so I'm going to try to power through it, but if I'm sick, I know myself, there's a good chance I'm still going to do the case, but the video might be slower to come out because I'd have to do pauses and more edits to cough and stuff like that if I'm doing it a lot. So fingers crossed, we're going into the final part of the day. I don't know if we'll get told by the end of the day if we're going to have a Friday hearing or not. We are back. The feeds did begin with a little muted audio for the testimony, but we get the idea. He mentions the gun. They show photos of the gun, many angles of the gun. There was no blood when they saw the gun. The gun was loaded when they got it. They show the loaded magazine. The magazine was removed to make the weapon safe. There was a live round in the chamber. They removed as well. An orange bag was shown in a photo with a gun box. They show the gun box inside. A live round was in the gun bag. The gun and magazine are brought in and recognized. Lori questions if he took them or recognized them. No objection. Just wanted to know if he physically took the items, I guess. Lori's got some weird stuff in this part. We'll get there. A pile of evidence bags are brought to the witness. This is the gun case, the orange bag, and the live round that was in the bag. Lori objects for foundation, wanting a serial number, and the judge says he testified these are the items from the scene, so you can just bring that up on cross. They show images of 2 rooms. They didn't find blood. No blood was found on any of the gun items or around it. Reiterating, blood was not found in other rooms, no blood in sinks or countertops, no bloody items found, no blood drops in the hall. There was a lanyard on the wall, still there. No blood on the kitchen floor or cabinet, but they found what is possibly a small amount of blood on the kitchen faucet. Now, could be blood, could not be blood. Could be from a, meat cutting, technically, a little red stain there. Could be blood from someone cutting themselves. They have no mention of it being tested, right? And that's why it's kind of weird. Like, that is, like, if you were to ask me, do you have blood in your sink? Kitchen sink's probably the most likely, unless you cut yourself, like, shaving. No blood in the trash, no blood in the living room on the floors, walls, or furniture. They basically did a full walkthrough of the house saying no bloody items were found while showing the photos. 1 drop on the kitchen faucet and the area around the body. That's where the blood was. Talk of the bullet strike under the body. He applies his shooting reconstruction training at scenes like the body and the casing, the projectile locations, the exit wounds. He observed the wounds of Charles's chest, abdomen, and back. 2 entrances, 2 exits, the bullet that entered into the baseboard with other factors. He could follow the trajectory to where the shooter was at the time, with the damage to the floor, location of the injuries, location of the projectile. They could find that for the second shot, the shooter was near the feet of Charles Vallow. You can't stick a rod into the body at the scene to follow the trajectory. They don't allow that. With evidence, it was consistent that Charles Vallow was on the ground when he was shot the second time. He attended the autopsy. He explains that they're allowed to watch. They can talk to the staff during. They even have an overhead camera to get angles. The autopsy techs can actually put the trajectory rods in and take measurements. They couldn't on the scene. It further supported he was shot in the abdomen. He believes the evidence shows he was on the ground with the second shot. The trajectory rod did that alone, showing that he had to be on the ground. The divot in the floor, no stippling on the body. There was nothing other than that conclusion shown by the evidence. And now it's time for Lori's cross. She wants to talk to her counsel first. There was muting, and then the jury got sent out. So this had to be info we got from people physically there because this was all muted and not seen. Lori didn't want to have this cross interrupted, but the judge says they have over half an hour, so they're getting started. Lori then has a sidebar, and the jury is told to leave. Lori leaves as well, but her team and prosecution stay. Lori returns smiling, and the judge asks all set, and she says yes. Kind of felt like a forced delay. I don't know. It's weird that I don't know why they did that. Maybe she had to use the bathroom. We are back with Lori at the podium. They ask about the witness's work history. He wrote a report about what happened that day shortly after the event. He doesn't know when he started typing it. He lists who was there and when they arrived. He parked north of the scene. He got a briefing before going into the house. Lori wanted to know who led the briefing, but there wasn't really a leader. It was just explaining what they all knew individually. After the briefing, he contacted a detective at the police department to get the search warrant going and waited for that to return. They can't enter until the search warrant is issued. He goes over the process of photos and measurements. It is protocol to do photos first. Blood was searched for after the photographs were taken. The lizard Q was done after the initial photos. Divide and conquer to photograph the house. It's a big house. Lori wants to know how long they were there, and he said he doesn't look at his watch. It wasn't protocol for him to pick up all the evidence himself. They left around 4:30 p.m. Lori asks anything else that she missed that they actually did, and he's like measurements, waiting for medical examiner, basically listed everything we've already heard. Someone searched the backyard for blood evidence or anything related to what happened inside. He didn't know who. Let's see here. They asked someone asked for something to be turned off because it sounded like maybe Lori's notes were projecting. Because of what they were using to show the photographs before. Something like that. It's hard to hear. The screen did change behind the witness, so it sounds like something got changed. Maybe like the projector was on. Lori asked to explain the difference between a revolver and a semi-automatic gun, which he does. I'm not going to repeat it here. Lori asked if it's common in gun classes to say shoot center mass. He says that's police training. Lori asks if it's a common phrase to say to center mass. He says he's heard it, but he wouldn't call it common. Lori asks if he would teach that in his class. He says he wouldn't teach it to officers or novices. He would say until the threat went away, which could be one shot. Lori asks in what direction do the casings from the gun go? He said he didn't test this gun, but most likely to the right. Lori says so it could have gone to the left. He says no, because the ejection port is on the right. He explains how it works. Lori says so a right-handed gun goes right and a left-handed gun goes left. Witness says doing the opposite is rare to see. Some people do have left-handed guns. They talk about the shells that bounce. Detective thinks it bounced off the wall. Basically, the issue is the detective believes the casing bounced to the right, hit the wall, and then bounced to the left and went and rested a couple inches from the other wall, which makes perfect sense, but Lori's trying to find anything. Lori asked how fast casings come out of the gun. He's never measured it. Casing didn't leave any marks. They normally don't leave marks. Lori asked if Alex said where he was standing. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained. Lori asked if Alex showed where he was standing. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained. Lori asked if there was a wall next to where he was standing. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained. Lori gets testy with the judge and says, she's asking if he observed that man standing in place. And the judge says she can ask if he saw Alex standing in a place. And he said yes, he saw him. She asked it, and he saw him standing where he indicated. Lori tries another question about where Alex shot during the shooting. Objection. The judge says if it involves where he stood during the shooting, it is hearsay. Lori asks again. She keeps harping on it. The judge says this is a form of hearsay. New question. Lori doesn't understand. Why is what the witness saw not relevant? Sidebar time. Comes back. She asked the detective where he would place the shooter. He explains the directions he would expect each shot. Lori asked, so the shooter moved. And he said, no, he is changing his direction. The witness is saying he is not saying the shooter moved. He's saying the shooter changed direction. Lori is saying, so you are saying he didn't move. And the witness says, I'm not saying that. His belief for the first shot, the casing hit the wall and bounced off. The second shot, same thing happened. Lori asked how, then, the casings were like how far apart were they? He said a few feet. And then Lori asked if he didn't move, would they be a few feet or closer? And he said that depends on different things like angle, or the shooter could have moved slightly. And Lori said, well, you say he didn't move. And the witness has to explain to her, I said I said I didn't, the witness said, I didn't say he didn't move. That's the best she's ever gotten out of the man. He's not saying he moved. He's not saying he didn't move. He could have moved a little in the general area. Lori asked if it's usual for someone to shoot, move, and then shoot again. Objection, speculation, sustained. Lori rewords again, but it's the same question. Objection, sustained. Let's talk about stippling. The way Lori said that, I had to mention it. It was a weird way. Lori says that you said the first shot had stippling. And he said, no, I didn't. Did the second shot have stippling? It did not. Lori asked if that's in the ME's report. He says, I believe so. And Lori asked for a minute, goes back to her desk. And then she asked about when observing the autopsy, did you discuss stippling? And he said they didn't. Lori said, would you be surprised if it was said in the ME's report, if it was said to someone else that there was stippling? Witness says, I don't know what he had in his notes. Witness describes stippling as particles that follow the bullet as it exits the barrel, and it is a close range phenomenon. Lori asks how far a gun would have to be to leave stippling. He says depends on the gun. Lori says this gun. He wants to know how far can you have stippling from the gun that's in this murder. The witness is not an expert on stippling patterns. The lab would have to test for it. Generally, the medical examiner would make an estimate. Lori says, would you be surprised if the medical examiner said 2 to 4 feet? The witness said if that's what he says. Witness said he would have to have the gun tested to see for himself, and then the jury is let out. So basically at this point, Lori is trying to do, well, the stippling, so he was this close, and because he was this close, it's self-defense. But at the end of the day, if you plan a murder, you plan to get someone killed, and you set up a scenario so you can claim self-defense, guess what? You're still going to be found guilty of that murder or a conspiracy to commit the murder. So this doesn't really help her. She has nothing else to go on, but it doesn't really help her. And it still sounds like he was a fair distance away. Again, it doesn't explain the second shot on the ground, as much as she wants to say 2 to the chest. I've heard that phrase, and generally it's you pull the trigger twice, quickly. Not you shoot, change your angle, and then shoot them on the ground. Again, the guy was not a threat after he was on the ground after the first shot. And he was going to die after the first shot. The second shot was just making sure, and then they took an extra, 40-some minutes before calling 911 to be really sure. The judge asked to be informed of all evidence that might be submitted because it takes a while to get through the photos. Judge calls out Lori adding things at the end of witness answers. So the witness will answer and she'll say, I wasn't aware of that, or I don't know much about guns, or that's what I recall. That is a form of testimony. The state says detectives have been subpoenaed to come tomorrow and a civilian too, but they don't have a number to call, but they were told to come in tomorrow. And the judge is basically like, the state's not going to close tomorrow, and Lori said it should have been to call in tomorrow. They should call Lori's investigator. The state will pass the number along. She says, I didn't get to see the subpoenas. It was handled by someone else. And that's the end of the day. So, I mean, she doesn't have a good defense, right? But everything she's gone off of thus far does not paint self-defense in any way. Even in her own variants, it's still not self-defense. She may it really feels like she's going through the motions, which she is, right? She is. But she should have just tried to plead guilty and gone back to prison quickly. That's what she should have done. So, I don't know if this witness is done or not. Lori wanted to finish today, but she ended, so I'm guessing that's the final question, but they didn't really, at least I heard, tell him he's free to go, so maybe he'll be back up tomorrow. She really thought she had something with the stippling, but be like Nephi. If you're trying to pull self-defense, be like Nephi.